Point students, it's Philip. It is Monday afternoon. I just wanted to jump at you guys with a quick Five with Phil to talk to you a little bit about some of the questions you guys asked several months ago. I know that we went through the top 5 series right after the beginning of the year, back in January and parts of February and even into March. But there were a couple of questions on there that I wanted to address specifically because we didn't really get to them then. I think they're important for us to listen to now. And so the question that came up several different times as well is, why does God take his time to answer our questions? That question comes up because we feel like we're talking to God, we're spending time praying, and we're talking, and we feel like God isn't answering or responding to our questions. And so I think it's important for us to jump back and think about things for a few minutes. Sometimes whenever you're in conversation with somebody, if you're the only one talking, how often do you hear? Unless somebody just interrupts you and just stops the conversation from going, how likely are you to actually hear what they're telling you? And so sometimes I feel like we can get that way with God, and we can constantly be, God, why haven't you answered my question yet? Why haven't you answered my prayer? Why? And God may just be kind of sitting back saying, are you finished? Are you done? I've got something I want to talk to you about, but you aren't being quiet and listening. And so we look in the Bible and we see the example of Elijah, and I love this example because Elijah is a guy in Scripture that God used in amazing ways. If you were on Facebook at all, and I'm sure most of you guys weren't, on Thursday I did a devotional for our church during Facebook Live, and I talked about Elijah, the prophet, as in chapter 19 of 1 Kings, he was talking to God and was asking God to kill him. Asking God just to take my life. I'm done with it. I'm so tired of it. What's the point? And this is right after in chapter 18 of 1 Kings, where Elijah had gone up on top of Mount Carmel and had been in a competition, if you will, with the prophets of Baal. Baal was a false god, and the prophets of Baal were pretty affluent. They were very influential in their culture, and so Elijah going up against them was a big deal because he went up against Ahab and Jezebel. And if you want to look at some of the context behind that, go to 1 Kings. It's in the Old Testament. Look in chapters 15 through 20, really, and just kind of see what's in there. But specifically for this example, we see Elijah calling down fire. There's a song that a band called Bella Reeves sings. It's called Calling on Fire. And so Elijah called on fire, and when he called on the fire from heaven, he was calling on God to just show out and just show his power. And so God came down and he burned up the altar that Elijah had set up for him. But he also created a huge issue for the Baal worshippers, because he not only burned up Elijah's altar, but he burned up also the Baal worshippers' altar and a bunch of water that was all over everything. And so God showed himself in a massive way to all these people who were witnesses to it. And then following that, in 1 Kings chapter 19, we see Elijah running for his life because a woman named Jezebel, who was King Ahab's wife, was coming after him. She said, if I am not able to kill you, may I die. Basically was her response to that. And so in that, Elijah became fearful for his life. He took off and ran away. He fled, as we like to say in student ministry. He fled for his life. He ran for his life. He was fleeing. And so in doing that, Elijah ended up in a cave, and God asked him, what are you doing here? Like, why are you here? And Elijah said, well, I've been doing all these great things for you, but still I'm the only one by myself. Your people have turned away, and now I've got somebody coming after me with a sword after me. Like, my head is on the chopping block, and somebody's coming after me. And God said, won't you just step outside on top of this mountain, out of this cave, and stand in my presence? And so God used the display of power through a mighty wind that came through, is knocking stuff off the cliff walls. He used, and it says in Scripture specifically that the Lord was not in the wind. Then there was an earthquake, and then there was a fire, and the Lord was not in any of those things. But then we see there was a small whisper, a still voice that came, and the Lord was in that, and he was asking Elijah again, why are you here? And Elijah finally realized that he had been looking for reasons to not listen. And I don't think he was intentionally doing that. I think that he was overwhelmed by his circumstances. And so when we see that, we can relate that to us, because again, Scripture is written for us and not to us, that we can see the example of Elijah there where God spoke to him in that still, small, soft voice. It was a whisper, as described in some translations of the Bible. But oftentimes we don't sit quietly. Oftentimes we don't pray. We don't, when we're praying, we're talking. Prayer isn't only us talking. Sometimes it's us just being silent before the Lord. And so in this time right now, well, not just this time right now during this pandemic, but during any time, if we're waiting on God to give us an answer, are we truly waiting, or are we talking and telling God, I need an answer, I need you to give me an answer, and God's just standing back saying, well, when you're ready to listen, I'll talk. And so I want to encourage us today, because we get so busy and we get so mindful of everything else around us and don't stop and listen to God. And I want to challenge you today. Are you so wrapped up in the chaos around us that you're missing what God is telling you? Are you so busy? Are you so caught up in the noise around you, or even in your own boredom, that you're missing what God is telling you because you can't hear the whisper? So I want to challenge you guys today. Read that passage in 1 Kings chapters 18 and 19. It's wild. It's crazy. But it's so encouraging to know that God will use so many different things to draw us near to Him. And in this instance for Elijah, who needed to hear God's still small voice, that he used that whisper after a mighty wind, after an earthquake, after a fire. And God can speak to us through these different things that we have going on in our lives as well. And so I want to encourage you guys to seek Him in that. Love you guys. Have a great week. Be looking out. We're going to be doing some pretty fun stuff the rest of this week. So keep an eye on social media. And your parents ought to be in on the loop as well for those things. But I just wanted to get to tell you guys, man, I love y'all. And we'll see y'all hopefully very soon.